Okay, let me go on to this next bit in communication, because I think there is something really important in this. I did, early on in my ministry, was fortunate to do some training with a guy called Dave Cormack. And early on in that, he said to me that there were 3 C's of managing change. And he said the 3 C's of managing change are communicate, communicate, communicate. I think I've shared that with you already. Actually, that one is really important at the moment. How do we communicate well with each other? Actually, the UK government and the Scottish government both recognise the importance of that just now. That's why their weekly or daily are actually coming and sharing things with us. Sorry, I forgot to. So they're taking the time because they know that communication is incredibly important during this period. When there's uncertainty, you actually need to communicate more. When things are more certain, communication is less important. But communication at the moment is incredibly important. And we need to be aware of that in all that we're doing. So I think actually letting people know what is going on is important for us, and finding ways to do that. I'm not sure how you've been doing that, but yesterday I went online and I ordered a banner to put up in the church. Now maybe I should have done it before now. Actually, I'm glad I didn't, because the details probably would have changed, but I think I'm confident enough in the details now that actually putting up a banner in the church to let people know what's going on is important. Now, that's just one way of communicating. I'm not saying all of you need to go away and buy a banner for your church. Please don't misinterpret this. What I'm saying is that we need to find ways of communicating. We regularly put banners on our church, and so this is a banner that we'll be putting up hopefully later this week or early next week, depending on when it arrives. So how do we communicate well with folk during this time? How are we passing information on, and do we need to improve that? That's the first question I'm going to ask you to look at. How are we managing the communication? The second thing is to understand that communication runs in 2 directions. So to use this illustration, we need walkie-talkies and not a radio. Folk need to be able to speak to us as well as us speak to them. It's not about us simply telling them what's going on or what we are doing. It's also about us hearing from them. That is important for us. So the second question would be, how can you create more opportunities for people to speak or communicate with you? That's Balsinger's point. Be as caring and present as possible. And as you ask that question, what I'd like you to do is think of how you widen your scope of who you listen to and how. So I'm just about to email out our younger families because I want to know what they're thinking. I'm actually going to be asking them to communicate with me. What is it that they're looking for? I need to find ways of communicating with them and of making sure that they can speak to me. Last week, I met with some of our folk in their 20s and early 30s, did a Zoom call with them because I needed to hear. I phone some of my elderly folk every week. And I need to have those different perspectives from different groups of people. So how do you widen your scope of who you listen to and how? And how do you even take it outside of church folk to other folk? How can you get their perspective on things as well? Now, I'm not providing you the answers. I'm simply saying these are the questions I think we need to be asking. Struck by this quote from Ed Davey this morning on Radio Scotland, quoting Boris, or talking about Boris Johnson. He said, "My worry is he's listening to some of the people on the right wing of the Conservative Party who put him there, and he's listening to big Tory donors. He should be listening to people who represent everybody in our country." So he's saying, actually, Boris needs to listen to everybody. And the danger is that we drop into the trap of listening to certain folk and shaping things around them because they're the folk that we hear and don't actually pay attention to other voices. So how do we make sure that we listen to a number of voices and not just a few? So how can you create more opportunities for different people to speak or communicate with you. Now, answering this will help you as you experiment and evaluate. That's what we looked at last time. How do you experiment and evaluate? Actually, speaking with different groups of people will help you shape your experiments and will help you evaluate what you're doing. That conversation, that communication is really important for the experimentation and for the evaluation. And as we mentioned earlier, it will also build trust. So these three things, how are you passing information on to members and the wider community, and in what ways could you improve that? The second thing, what opportunities are there for people to speak to you and what are you hearing from them? How is it shaping what you're doing? And then that final question, in what ways could that hearing from people be widened and improved on? So it's these three things around communication. They help to build trust, but they also help us to shape the experiments and to evaluate the things that we're doing. So it's important for both of those things. Passing on information, how you're doing it, what opportunities are there for them to speak, and how's that shaping what you're doing, and in what ways could that be widened and improved on.